Hey, I'm Steve Lacy. We are here in my New York City art studio. I'm going to show you how I took this photo of Guns N' Roses taken in 1987 in front of New York's legendary punk rock nightclub, CBGB's, and turned it into this 60 by 60 acrylic screen print on canvas. So every piece starts by taking a high-res image and manipulating it on Photoshop. As you can see here, I start by playing with the light levels. Every finished piece is a bunch of colors meticulously stacked on top of each other. Interestingly, the bottom layer, which is always the lightest color and typically is a flesh tone, starts out on Photoshop as the darkest so I can have the most details and texture, especially when it comes to the people's faces. Then I gradually make each layer lighter and more refined using the bitmap feature to work in dots and lines, all at carefully complementary angles so that they don't clash with the layers above and below them. The end result are pieces that wind up bearing a striking resemblance to the photo itself that they're based on, while still having an artistic personality entirely their own. Okay, so once the Photoshop portion is finished and each color is separated into its own layer, I then turn all of them into black and white images, which are printed onto massive transparencies, which I then burn onto screens, which have been coated in a light-sensitive photo emulsion. For this Guns N' Roses piece, I wound up printing up 40 plus feet of film off a 44-inch wide transparency roll. As you'd imagine, that is not cheap, but it's just simply part of the process that you can't avoid. Now this shot gives you a good look at what the transparencies look like in real life. Here I'm using the transparency of the blue-gray layer to help me line up exactly where the screens should be positioned. Now when I'm working on the layer over the flesh-colored one, as in this instance, it often helps to throw down the transparency over the actual piece to help with registering the print and making sure everything is exactly where it should be. I then remove the transparency, line it up again, hope for the best, and then push the ink through. Every color you see in the final piece begins as a part of a transparency that is the same size as the finished piece, which is transferred then onto screens in a Lightroom using an exposure unit to burn them onto a screen covered in a light-sensitive photo emulsion. Once that's done, I wash off the screen to reveal the image. Wherever was covered by the black ink on the transparency washes off because that was not exposed to light. All the rest stays on. I then dry it off and I push ink through the image on the screen onto the canvas. Once I'm done using the screen, I then strip it with a chemical reclaimer and do that process over and over and over again until countless of dozens of studio hours later, I have something that looks like this. Now a little more background on this particular image. This is from my collaboration with famed rock and roll photographer Mark Weiss. He took these images during a whirlwind week in October of 1987 when Guns N' Roses was in New York City promoting Appetite for Destruction, which at that point had failed to take off yet after its release earlier that summer. Mark writes about his time with the band in his book, The Decade That Rocked. Weiss Guy, as he's known, captured a bunch of photos of the band, both at CBGB's, where they played an acoustic set, and at his photo studio around the corner from Madison Square Garden. Now, I've worked extensively with the images he captured of the band during this magical week, and they are undeniably some of the best pictures ever taken of the band, particularly when you realize this was just before they blew up and became one of the biggest bands in the world in the months that followed. This finished 60 by 60 piece will be making its debut at the Superfine Art Fair in New York City, September 14th through 17th in the Flatiron District.